about men? You want to talk about men? Oh my God in heaven.
Not if you're going to do that the whole time.
The whole fucking Cockney accent. I wish that they had done that in the movie the entire time. Just every character that Rory Kinnear plays just has a different British accent. Yeah. Or a different, I guess, like a different, yeah, it would be an accent, right?
Yeah.
Some Liverpudlian. No, it's just all very Herefordshire, creepy countrymen. Oh my God, Mark. I had no intention of watching this movie. I want to just put this out there at the top of this episode. This was not something I had any intention of watching, even though I'm such a huge fan of Annihilation. The premise to me did not, I kind of knew what to expect before I watched the movie.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you something. On this episode of the Culture Cast, I'm joined by my good friend, Mr. Mark Begley from the Wake Up Heavy podcast.
Howdy.
This is my favorite movie of the year so far. There is not even anything that has come close.
Awesome.
It's the best thing I've watched all it.
So
this is the movie I would have made if I made a movie about this subject material, which is almost you take a grenade and you pull the pin and you stick it in your mouth the moment you want to make this movie. That's the way I look at it. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you did. Like I said, I missed it initially and saw it when I was looking at the Crimes of the Future page. And I was like, oh, I'll watch this right now. I'm going to hold off on Crimes of the Future. I got to have time for that. And I thought, oh yeah, I want to watch this.
What is this?
Men.
Men.
Menzies.
Men. Alex Garland's 2022 Men.
Hello.
Hi.
Mrs. Marlowe, yes?
Harper, yes.
Do, come in.
The words I have to say.
It's a beautiful house.
But they're true.
Will it just be you staying, or
Excuse me?
Mrs. Marlowe?
No.
Until you give your love, there's nothing more that we can do.
Apple from the garden?
Yeah, it was delicious.
No. Mustn't do that. Forbidden fruit.
Oh, God, sorry,
I'm joking.
Oh.
You're tormented.
It feels more like...
Haunted.
Yeah. Something happened. My husband went upstairs to our balcony and let himself go.
You must wonder why you drove him to it.
I didn't drive him to it.
I thought it'd be true. But if you had given him the chance to apologize, he'd still be alive.
What? A man followed me out of the woods. He was stalking me.
What makes you say that?
I saw him twice.
Twice. I don't know if he saw you once.
Well, play a game. You hide, I'll see.
You must feel an awful sense of guilt.
Stay away from me.
What are you doing now?
What are you?
So like I mentioned, the film is directed by Alex Garland, who has directed a couple other films that, one film I'm a fan of, other film I know everybody else is a fan of, Ex Machina and Annihilation. And the film stars Jessie Buckley and Rory Kinnear. Jessie Buckley plays a woman who is going on a vacation to get away from a trauma that happened in her apartment. And she stumbles upon a town where every man is played by Rory Kinnear. And I'm only going to say played because there's a lot of questions I've got here. I got a lot of questions. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on in this movie. We are going to talk spoilers, but I think you would agree, Mark, and I'm going to give you the floor as opposed to me talking about it pre-spoilers. This is a movie you would suggest people watch, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I knew what to expect as well as far as the themes and
right. With the title like Men.
And the on your nose metaphors that are happening throughout. And I loved it too. Probably not my favorite of the year, but I will be watching it again. This is one of those where I'm trying to think of another one. Well, like the smaller, I'm thinking of the quote unquote A24, because this is A24, like Black Coat's Daughter, or
that sheep movie from last year.
Yeah. Lamb, which I really liked.
Yeah.
Slow Burn,
Lighthouse, Northman,
cultish,
stuff like that.
folk horror-y.
Midsummer.
Yeah, not so much Midsummer.
But it's in that same milieu of Midsummer.
Yeah, it is. Over the head metaphor.
Oh.
I think this works for me a little bit better than the on the nose metaphors and Midsummer, but part of that is probably because I really like both Jessie Buckley and Rory Kinnear. I have liked them in everything that I've seen them in, respectively. And I mean, I like Florence Pugh, and I can't even remember who else was in Midsummer. Most of those other people I didn't really know prior, but I think she's fantastic, and I love him. I've loved him since watching him fuck a pig in Black Mirror. You know, I mean,
all right. I remember, what was he? He was in, he played something in those original, in those Pierce Brosnan and James Bond movies. He was in those, I'm pretty sure, as somebody in MI6, which is the first time I ever saw him. He was in Penny Dreadful as Frankenstein's monster, which I remember being pretty good. No, pre-spoilers, like I said, I kind of gave it away. This is like this is the best movie I've seen so far this year. And this is right up there with Annihilation for just like, there's so much going on. There's subtext, context, pretext. It's allusions to religion. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about, but yeah, go watch this movie for sure.
It's so simply done, though, that it almost seems simplistic. And I think that's some of the criticism that I saw in my, Twitter feed and other places. But like you said, and why I said I would watch it again, is because you're going to start picking up on all that stuff third, fourth, fifth time watching, because there isn't a lot said about these things, but it's all there floating around, right? In the images and the symbols and stuff that just my little bit of reading I did right now before doing this, like, okay, that makes sense.
Right. So let's just talk spoilers. We're going to talk the movie. And I think I'm not going to say we're going to go through this chronologically, but there are some big things we need to talk about initially. The opening of this film is wild. It's rough. Just to get this out of the way, if unlifing yourself is something that upsets you, this is a movie to avoid 100%. And we probably should have said that pre-spoilers, frankly. So spoilers from here on out. So the movie opens with a character unaliving themselves, and the main character played by Jessie Buckley, it is her husband. And you find out throughout the movie, kind of you're given context of the fight, kind of it's told in reverse, essentially, as the movie goes on. And then you cut to her going out to Herefordshire to stay in a not a cabin, but let's just call it a cabin.
Definitely not a cabin.
But it's trying to evoke that. The isolation in the middle of it's trying to.
I didn't even think about that. That's
right.
Pretty good.
Right, but it's trying to evoke. Kid. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I was operating on next level watching this movie. I swear to God. Like I said, like when I was done watching this movie, all I could think was Alex Garland is slowly, and by slowly I mean quickly, and by quickly I mean he's here now, has become a director who, when he makes a film, as long as he's the one writing it and directing it, it is literary in nature. Like it feels like someone who understands just, the visual language, but also how that visual language can be reinforced by the dialogue of the characters. And again, it's a hard thing to do because visual allusions and visual cues and visual metaphors in films it's not hard to do, but when directors are known for doing it, sometimes they're known for overdoing it. And I don't think Alex Garland is there yet, but there's a lot of it in this movie. There's a lot of visual metaphors, visual allusions, visual cutaways to things that other directors just wouldn't do because they're not trying to reinforce visual themes throughout the movie. Like they keep showing the Green Man, and then they show the reverse of the Green Man. It looks like a urn almost, and it's a female figure with her vagina spread actually and naked, and they keep showing that over and over again. Like, tell me another director who does these kinds of visual things. It's a very small list, and it's an even shorter list of people who are as successful as Alex Garland has been in this movie, definitely in Ex Machina and also in Annihilation.
Yeah, and I think that's what, for me, takes it. You say it's that whole idea of show don't tell,
right?
And that's what this movie is for me.
Show, don't tell, and also don't fucking explain everything to me.
Don't explain anything.
Right. You can, well, here's the thing. You can explain some things to reinforce that I'm on the right track, but you don't need to explain everything, because once you've kind of given me the idea I'm on the right track or set me on that track, you theoretically, I should be able to go on my own and see the billboards that you're putting up. You don't have to keep telling me where to go. You know what I mean? Once I'm going the right direction, as long as you've set me that way, I feel like that's the thing. Like, once the director kind of makes his intentions known, especially in this movie very early on, I feel like he does such a good job of keeping you in those kind of narrow but broadly defined lines, but gives you interesting things to see and kind of reinforces 4 or 5 themes of the movie. But there's overall the big one is the men.
Yeah.
God.
Well, and the show and don't, like, obviously the and I'm not sure what it's called, that stand in the church. It's not an altar necessarily, but I'm sure there is a specific term for those things.
Right.
And I guess that's fairly common over there to have that.
It's a font is what it's called.
Font.
It's a baptismal font, which
to have
in and of itself is a thing, right?
Right. To have that Green Man figure on it. And I just read what the other one is, the Sheila Nagig. So it's like an Irish spirit thing.
Right.
And they both symbolize rebirth and things like that. Not knowing that before, I've seen that image of the male face,
the Green Man.
I've seen it. I couldn't specify what it was, but it's obvious. Okay, this is a pagan symbol. And then we have a character that's maybe emulating isn't the correct word, but is representing that in the film.
A physical representation.
Yeah. And not knowing specifically what the Green Man means and not being told what it means throughout the film.
Right.
You can make that connection though. And probably smarter people would make it quicker, but it's like, this obviously has something to do with, when we get towards the end of the film, what is happening to all these men.
Right.
Why are the men in this town also similar looking? And
so that's the question I have. Are the men in the town similar looking because they're cast as Rory Kinnear, or is it Alex? Here's what I think it is. I think it's Alex Garland doing something very smart, which is she never acknowledges they all look the same. Correct.
Yeah, right.
Which I assume means she is not seeing them all look the same.
That's definitely one way to take it.
And it's the reason they look the same is to use that as once again a visual metaphor and visual reinforcement of the theme of the movie. Because if everybody is the same, that's a pretty big statement about men as a whole, right?
That's the thing that kept coming up, seeing everybody complaining about, oh, I get it, all men are the same. But I also think, having done the little bit of reading I did, it could be, if she doesn't see him that way, they're represented that way, all men are the same. They don't all act the same, though. So I kind of go into the, what we get at the end of the film, thinking, oh, they're basically clones of each other. And that's reinforced for me after reading that the significance of the dandelions that's what dandelions are. They're basically clones of each other. The way that they reproduce asexually from a single, they're all basically the same plant.
Right. It also, it's also a white seed.
Right. And
it's also a white seed, bud.
And anybody who's had one in their yard, give it a week and you've got 50. And I didn't know that beforehand. Obviously, there's a significance to the dandelions. They keep being shown the fields of flowers and the fields of dandelions. The Green Man figure blows them in her face. She inhales one, goes through some kind of change. Okay, that means something.
Right.
I don't know what it means right at this moment, but that's that's what I like. Then I can go back now and watch it knowing that I've read. Okay, well, that makes sense. So are they clones? Are they just that way for us, the audience? Or
I think they're just that way for us, the audience.
Or does she just not recognize it because of, the state that she's in currently? They look, so, I mean, I can't say that I've ever been to a town where a lot of people look the same, but you can imagine some towns, especially in older countries, where the birth pool isn't super huge, where they kind of all start to look alike. I've seen families,
but only some of them look alike. Do you notice that? Only some of them, right? But Jeffrey, the landlord,
he has.
Which I'm wondering what is Alex Garland saying with that? Because again, all the characters look the same aside from like one. He's like, there's only one. Rory Kinnear is done up in prosthetics, only as one of them. And it's Jeffrey, the landlord, who is you believe to be the most sympathetic of all of them up until the end, which again feels it is intentional, but it feels like Alex Garland has something to say with that. I think once again, it is be careful. Even when you think this is the case, it may not be with men. But here's the thing. And I want to mention this because again, like you said, I have a friend, Josh Bragg of The Haunting Season. He's a TikToker. He makes horror content and he mentioned this to me. So I feel like I should mention it here because it is important to mention. And I'm kind of curious your take, Marcus, as someone who's a little older than me. Is it kind of a weird thing for Alex Garland, a cisgendered white man, to make a movie about men from a female perspective? I don't think there's a problem with it because of the way the movie is done, but I can 100% see how it could be taken and seen that way. And that's why I said the whole taking a grenade and sticking it in your mouth thing, the moment you decide to tackle this subject matter, you have already decided you're going to be just painting targets on your back constantly. You're asking for it if you're a director making this kind of movie, because the response is going to be, well, you're just saying all men are terrible. If that was your takeaway from this movie, watch this movie again. How's that? I'm not even going to talk down to someone. I'm just going to say, just seriously watch it again because you'll get something different from it the second time. Probably the more nuanced message that Alex Garland was trying to get across.
Yeah, it's not just that. That is a simplistic take on the film. And obviously some people are going to take it that way. And that's fine. If you don't want to dig any deeper or think about the other components, then sure. And horror fine too, even for me. It works for me as a simple all men are
horror movie. That's the horror movie right there. The simple state of this movie is a man who is possibly a clone is tormenting a woman. If you want to boil it down to its base elements, there you go. But everything, like there in and of itself is just the slasher genre almost.
Right.
For 50 years.
How is that any different?
Right.
Really?
But that's where you bring in Alex Garland and his eye for visuals. And that's the other thing. If you're a moviegoer and you come away from this movie going, all men are bad, do you really think that's all Alex Garland was trying to say? I'm not, you know what I mean? Like he spent all this time and effort making this movie just to say all men are bad. Like really, if that's what you come away from this movie with, you really, okay, like either watch it again, or if that's all you want to take from it, then fine.
I think you have to look at her guilt, or lack of guilt, or, her trauma as well. And what the men, the clones, the whatever you want to lookalikes, what that might be saying about that, because at the end of the film, we have a long birthing sequence where every character gives birth to one of the other ones. And
Dead Alive. We just talked about Dead Alive, and here it is, like second rebirthing I've ever seen.
The last one ends up being her husband with the wounds that he basically suffers when he falls onto some railing. And it feels to me like at the end of that, she realizes, or I don't know if I want to say accepts, that possible feeling of guilt that she might have because this happened to them after a fight and after she kicked him out. And like you said, we get that whole story in reverse. The film opens with her in her flat, and she obviously has a bloody nose. We don't know why. And then she's looking out her window and we see a figure falling down, and they make eye contact, and that's it. And then it gets pieced together.
She perceives that they make eye contact.
Yeah, right. Which is
important,
helped by the slow motion of the shot itself. But then, like you said, we get kind of in reverse all the way to the beginning of that encounter with them that ends up becoming violent. And
by the man strikes, her husband strikes her.
Yeah, hits her in the face.
Important distinction. He punches her
in the face.
Yep.
And she kicks him out, right? I mean, I'm glad there was no hemming and hawing with that. I appreciate that direct, like,
it's over.
The fuck out of here.
Yeah, it's over. You have crossed the line that you should not cross.
He's already intimated that he will kill himself if she divorces him. And you can't, I mean, that's just that's a tactic that abusers use. Mm-hmm. And we don't know anything about their prior life other than she's fed up and divorcing him. Things have obviously been bad. At one point, she states that he had never hit her before when she's talking to the vicar. Whether that's true or not, we have no way of knowing. But I think you can at least assume he was manipulative, maybe verbally abusive, and these other things just by the interactions that we do see them having. And then when he falls, whether it was an accident or not,
which is never completely confirmed either way.
Right. I mean, because no one knows, and no one but him would know. And
which is, again,
dead.
Smart, absolutely smart injection into the film on Alex Garland's part.
So whether she's going to have some guilt, whether she, she tells him, you can't tell me something like that. And then after she hits him, of course, she's really angry. And she's like, it doesn't matter what you do because I don't care. And I think that's probably not exactly true either. So she's holding on to some kind of pain. And I think that it's coming to terms with that pain. Part of this whole rebirth cycle and the rebirth images and her inhaling a dandelion, whatever the individual little things are called.
A spore,
I guess. Yeah. All of that, I think, is her maybe coming to terms with, okay, this is pain that I have to deal with, and, let's deal with it.
And whether or not it's her fault, she has to deal with it.
Right. It doesn't matter. If it's her fault, because she'll feel how she feels about it.
Right.
But it may also be a pain that's transformative. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously the main takeaway, or the simple version here, is all men are creep. There's micro and macro aggressions throughout the film, depending on the male that she's currently dealing with, dismissiveness.
That's the cops.
The cop, right. And of course, the female cop, when she calls them out and she's talking with her, is very pleasant and understanding. And she calls the cops.
But even then, that female character is slightly dismissive, which I think is interesting.
She does say, he's most likely not harmful.
Right.
These old nuggets, you know.
Oh, he's just an old guy. He can't do anything.
He didn't resist. He's not doing, just apple scrumping and so yeah, I get it. I get walking away with just that was just this. But for me, it was not. just this. This is not just all men bad. Men bad. That's what he should have called it. Men, semicolon, bad.
Bad men. Bad Men, the movie. I agree. And again, the way I look at it is just just simplistically, my response to anyone who thinks that is just, again, there's an easier way to tell that story. There's a much easier way to tell that story than to jump through all the hoops. But to your point, on the point, I think, as you kind of look through the movie, there is almost a different representation of every kind of man a woman might interact with on a daily basis. And again, I understand and I appreciate, just like Mark does, that we are both white men. I am gay. Mark is not. So again, our opinions are going to be informed by our experiences as men, but I'm married. You have a wife and a daughter as well. So my opinions are more recently informed because I sit and I listen to my wife, as I'm sure you do, about her experiences that I cannot begin to understand, like standing in a tunnel and seeing a man at the end of it fucking running at you. Which the way Alex Garland shoots it helps evoke the feeling that I can imagine a woman feels in that situation.
And also it goes to what we talked about when we talked about it. I kind of described that scenario as something that would creep me out. I mean, he is running, but it's a far distance. You're going, why is this person running at me? And she doesn't stand around to find out. She does the smart thing and runs away. But, you mentioned that a guy, a white man, I'm assuming he's a white man. I'm not really sure if I've ever even seen a picture of Alex Garland making a film like this to take toxic masculinity to task. And we're going to be talking about a film that I think kind of falls under that same umbrella with Silence of the Lambs. The book was written by a white man. The film was directed by a white man, but it's about a strong female character who experiences the same kind of microaggressions and macroaggressions. Dr. Chilton, Jack Crawford, Hannibal Lecter, Buffalo. I mean,
every man in that movie.
The other cadets or whatever.
The only one that doesn't is her father. Which is a whole point in that movie.
Can you? Sure. Of course. Yeah. I mean, of course men can. Are they going to nail it 100%? Well, I guess you'd have to ask women.
Well, and that's the thing. Like the way I look at a movie like this, just at the base level, a movie about so clearly and obviously having something to say about toxic masculinity to the point where this movie is called Men. Yeah, I get it that for a man to make a movie like this might seem like a problem. But here's the thing. Are you telling me you don't want to have men in the community of men who don't feel this way? Because Alex Garland is making this movie because he feels this way about other men too. He's saying that knowing, and I know that too. I know a large amount of men do act like this because I've seen it and I've done it and I've done it myself. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I haven't. I've acted like an asshole to women sometimes, not intentionally, not on purpose, but it happens. I'm a lot better about it now in my old age, just like you would probably agree. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like there's no, that is, and that is like your point. There are things in this movie that the male characters say that you can't just discount because they're terrible. Like you said, the vicar does point out the guilt thing. Which is an important thing because it's not, again, by best we can tell, it's not her fault, but she's going to feel guilt either way. And like he says, do you want the truth or do you want to be comfortable? But then he immediately follows it up by saying, you pushed him to it. So again, but that is again, like that counterpoint where it's like who it's coming from doesn't necessarily discount it immediately until it does. And then, then discount it immediately because they are a complete and utter asshole. But again, it's also this whole thing of viewing people as black and white also is a problem. Again, that's also the other thing the movie is trying to make a point about, because again, they do give the male characters in this movie humanity, which would lead me to believe that Alex Garland is trying to give them a little bit of a sympathetic nature, which I think does come across. It's not a lot, but that's also, once again, the intention.
They're not gross stereotypes. They're not, it's And really, she really only interacts with 4 of them. So Jeffrey on multiple occasions, the cop twice, I guess, the little boy, and the vicar. And the Jeffrey, I think, is maybe the most deceptive,
right?
Because he is the most pleasant, and there are a number
under
of times,
all the prosthetics hiding it.
But there are a good handful of times where you think he's going to come out with the microaggression or
where he's going to turn the corner,
and he never really does. So when she first gets there and he says, "Where's hubby?" and you're going, "Oh, this guy assumes," or is saying like, "Why aren't you here with your husband?" basically.
Right.
And she's, taken aback by it, of course. And he said, it's Mrs. Marlowe. No.
Right.
And, and because
innocuous.
That's what she put on. Yeah, it is. Right. And because that's what she put on her application. And there's things like that where it looks like he's going to turn that corner and never does. So you almost think at the end, oh, he'll be the ally because he has been, and then the other time when the crow flies through the window and, she thinks it's someone breaking in and he finds the crow on the ground and she says, "Look, I'm telling you, there were people out front." And he said, I don't take you as a liar. I totally believe you. I'll go check it out. Right. And he does, and then he disappears.
And I love that scene because, again, it does 100% subvert your expectations. Alex Garland, at every moment in this movie, up until like the last 20 minutes, subverts your expectations entirely. Like you said, you're waiting for this one character who you're convinced is a baddie. It's going to turn the corner.
Baddies?
And are we the baddies? And you think he's going to turn a corner. You think he's going to turn a corner. And then he does finally at the moment when it's like, of course, this is when he turns the corner, when he goes ape shit. When you see that his arm is split like her husband's arm was split on the rail, which is in self-defense. And I loved that. I loved that his arm gets split like her husband's in self-defense, but yet he still blames her. You hurt me. You did this. It's like, shut up. It's not all women's fault. It's not. I mean, but that's one of the things that the movie is obviously really getting at is the constant blaming and vilification of women as some sort of, it's your fault. You don't want to have sex with me. You're rebuffing my advances. And you see that a lot. I mean, you see that with the vicar in the creepiest scene in the movie. And it's not the one that you're probably thinking I'm talking about. Not the one at the end. I'm talking about the one the first time they interact.
Yeah.
That is deeply upsetting.
Yeah.
Because there's a shot where it's up from her leg and you can see her, essentially you see where his hand is looking up at her face and you can see her getting uncomfortable with his hand being on her leg. And then when he realizes it, it's like, oh yeah. Sorry.
Right. And it's, I think that's done very well, very low key. The second he puts his hand on her leg, I'm going, okay, that's not okay. For one thing, she doesn't really flinch.
Not until his hand's been on her leg for a while.
Yeah. Then it's like, okay. So maybe this isn't making her uncomfortable. It's making me uncomfortable. And then, like you say, it's almost like he realizes, okay, it's been long enough and now I'll take my hand away. I just really enjoyed I'm trying to, I get that idea of this simple metaphor.
Right.
But while I was watching it, that was secondary to me because it's beautiful to look at. I like these actors. I like the framing of the shots. I like it. It just sucked me in. I don't know I'm trying to find the words to explain why it didn't matter to me whether it was a simple concept or construct or not. And plus it's folk horror, which I really love.
Right there with you.
And
that's what you should do for next year for the Culture Cast.
Oh, that's a good idea. The first time I watched it on Monday and I was like, I don't care if this was simple. This is the kind of simple that works for me. Not everything has to be 1,000 ideas, 50 million characters. It's beautiful storytelling, and I mean visually. And then when I watched it last night, and I made my wife and daughter watch it. I said, "You guys want to watch a weird movie after dinner? Because I need to squeeze in another watch of this, and I think I have more time to do it tonight than tomorrow." And they're like, "Okay."
You watch this with your family?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I gave a couple warnings. When she goes down and finds her husband on the rails, I was like, "This is pretty gnarly," and didn't seem to bother my daughter too much. But I mean, that thing through his arm was pretty brutal in my eyes. It made me flinch the first time I watched
it. I'm right there with you. It was a very realistic depiction.
Yes,
like
it was.
more. It was, we talked about Midsummer already. It reminded me of the opening of Midsummer, but I just want to get this out here right now. I loved this movie much more than I loved Midsummer. You know what? They're talking about the same things in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think that Ari Aster is the director that you were talking about, where it's like trying to do 10,000 things with all this like shit going on constantly. This is just, like you said, a simplified way of doing this, but there is so much going on.
Right.
This is a simple movie, but yet there are 1,000 things going on, but it's all done in a way that it doesn't get in the way of the story. And it doesn't even require you to know, like you said, you didn't have any frame of reference for Green Man. I did, because of a TV show that I watched a year and a half ago where they talk about goblins in Kentucky. And one of the things that they talk about is the Green Man myth. And they spent an entire episode on it. There's no way I could have known that was ever going to come up again in anything. But when I saw it in this, I was like, oh my God, that's the Green Man face.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what that meant. But like you said, even if you don't know what that means, he does a good enough job of giving you context clues.
Yeah.
Like this really is a literary piece in film form. I don't it really does feel like talking about a book in a lot of ways because of because of the use of a rich visual language. It's a visual language. That's all I can call it, because
that's kind of what I was bumbling towards earlier.
Yeah.
The visual language is what keeps me engaged, even though it is a simple story that's told very simply and only has a handful of characters and not a whole lot of dialogue. But the visual storytelling is so well done. And I will watch this way more often than I watch Midsummer. I've actually only seen Midsummer once in the theater.
Same.
And I liked it, not nearly as much as Hereditary, but I have yet to go back to it because, for one thing, it's really long and there's that too much stuff going on. This one I can see watching multiple times easily because I felt myself getting lost in it. And I was happy I didn't have to watch it again, but I'm glad I did because I picked up on a few more things. But so it kind of messed Cleo up a little bit. So
what are you talking about the ending?
Yeah. So the rebirthing scene,
the quadruple rebirthing.
She was like, "This is so weird," and I guess she woke up at night and not like scared, but it weighed on her mind.
Right.
The imagery.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about this movie. It is a horror movie,
right?
But it isn't in a lot.
But
of
it
ways.
Is though, because it does. It's not one of those A24s that is like, this is a horror movie, and then you get there and no, it's not. It is. It's a folk horror film.
Right.
It really is, and there are some horrifying stuff in it, some creepy stuff, and some gore and some nasty shit.
Right. Which is like, it is, but it isn't, but it is. Like, there's that thing where it's like, there's part of this movie where it's not a horror movie at all. And it's just her walking around the town, talking to the townspeople, not a horror movie. But then you bring it back to the horror movie and you understand that those scenes that you believed were not horror scenes really are. Because again, those scenes are being used to inform everything else, because they're clearly clearly what's going on is there's some sort of hive mind. There's something, they're all, like you said, since we're using the dandelion imagery to inform that would lead me to believe that is operating in some form or fashion. And you see that reflective every time that you see these male characters towards the end of the film, and they all have their arms split up Lobster Clawed. I don't know how else he would call it. There's only one other movie I've ever seen that wound in, and I believe it was Saw 6. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where Julie Benz has to take her hand and stick it through the table saw to give their pint of blood or whatever. And it's fucking gnarly in that movie, and you see it for like a second. In this movie, it is. Yeah. If you're grossed out by that, it's in the movie for like 20 minutes.
That knife through the door, through the arm in the door scene was the other thing I said, okay, this is also very gnarly.
That was that there are very few things that make me like shudder, but that was one of those things where I was just like, oof. Yeah. Oof. And it's you see the whole thing.
Yep.
He sticks his arm through the slot and he gets his arm cut. It's just fucking gnarly.
It is pretty gnarly. And I appreciate that in this. I appreciate it in this sense, in this film. And it makes sense because then you see it with the rebirthing of every reiteration of these characters, and they all have it. And then eventually they also have the compound fractured leg, which is another wound that her husband suffered. And so you're starting to think, well, wait, why the leg? I get the hand and the connection to that, but we saw the the arm gets sliced open by her. So then it morphs into that personal thing for her where she's got to come to terms with her feelings about what happened to her almost ex-husband. And that, to me, that takes this beyond, oh, all men are bad. It's what happens to the woman after these awful situations happen.
After the man behaves badly.
Right.
And that's a much more interesting and important question to ask or statement to make than all men are bad.
Yeah, because it's not that simple. It really isn't. And like you've already said, and I've kind of said too, if that's what you take away from this, you missed something.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely more going on here. And not to like elevate this to, oh, you've missed all these messages. You're just not smart enough. Like you're saying, not talking down to people who didn't get it. If that's all you took from it, fine.
It's a dense movie. Like I didn't get everything.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly didn't. I wouldn't have known that about dandelions. If they had maybe shown like mold spores or fern spores, I may have made that connection. I didn't know dandelions reproduced that way.
Right.
So again, didn't know what the Green Man was. I've seen that image before. I've seen things like the female image with the open vulva, and but you kind of just have to assume, oh, this pagan symbol probably has something to do with birth, maybe. Right. I mean,
given that it's a baptismal font,
the female figure, obviously, and
they show it so much. Like, how could you not? Like, that's the thing. Like, the thing that I again appreciate about Alex Garland is his visual language is constantly being reinforced subtly and unsubtly. I mean, there's a lot of overtness, but there is a lot of subtlety to what he does. My absolute favorite subtle little cue in the movie, and I'm curious if you noticed it, at the end of the scene with the vicar, she gets up, right, and walks off, and he's sitting there with his hand essentially on the bench where she was. Mm-hmm. And as the scene is ending, you saw what he did with his finger.
His finger slips through the crack.
Oh my God. I
picked up on that.
it's those kinds of things that I appreciate as a film goer, as someone who loves movies like you do, as someone who watches movies every day. Of my life, I watch movies. These are the kinds of movies that I fucking live for, are the movies where the director goes, I have a story to tell, but I also have a visual language to throw over this movie so that you can also be asking questions and doing your own kind of mental gymnastics while watching the movie, asking, is that what this means? Or is this what it means? Or now that I get that's what that means. I appreciate that so much. And I felt the same way when I walked out of Annihilation. People went into that movie expecting a big sci-fi horror movie and walked out going, what the fuck was this?
Don't make me think.
This movie is more successful than Annihilation in a lot of ways. I would say that this movie in a lot of ways also talks about the same things: loss, coming to terms with loss, grief, obviously. I mean, Annihilation is almost entirely about how do we process grief, which, again, oh my fucking God, I love that movie. But I love this. Now
I got to watch that again.
I have seen this movie, like you said, one time. I look forward to the moment I get to watch this movie again. Yeah. And I can't wait to show other people this movie, because this is also a movie where everyone is going to have a different read, because that's Alex Garland's intention. We're going to have we'll all be batting in the same ballpark, but we won't all be hitting the ball in the same part of the ballpark, but we're all in the same ballpark, because again, he has informed where we are playing. We are the ones making the decisions about how we inform our decisions about the movie and the themes of the movie.
Yeah. Show, don't tell, trust your audience, know that some people are going to take it on a superficial level. Some people are going to be intrigued by the stuff that's underneath. And I do honestly believe there is plenty of stuff underneath. Like you said, no one's just going to go out and make a movie like this just to say all men are bad. All men are creeps. All men suck. Right. All men hurt women. Right. And
because you know what? All men don't, because I don't and you don't.
And it doesn't even, you know what? Live your life thinking that. It doesn't even bother me if women think that. You know, you see the backlash to that online, obviously. But hey, man, if my daughter grows up thinking all guys are creeps, fine.
What has that been informed? What has that been informed by? Right, like
by
by the men she's probably interacted with. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like that is the other message in this movie is you might be looking and you don't see anything. And sometimes you are looking and it is there. And there is a fine line, because in this movie, you don't ever get a male character that isn't emotionally manipulative or abusive or violent. You never get one. The only characters in this movie that aren't that way are the two female characters in the movie, her friend and the female police officer. So you never get a man who is a protagonist, as it were, which again, I think is important and it's smart to do. But at the same time, it does give people who see this movie in one direction the kind of, oh, well, that's why all men are bad. Look, there is no good. And it's like, yeah, but at the same time, if the director is making this kind of movie, I wouldn't expect there to be one, frankly, because
there doesn't need to be one. We don't need that savior.
Because we know that it's not the case entirely. And that's not what he's saying anyway.
And if you can't see something like that and walk out without saying like, oh, well, where are the good guys? It's like, man, that's not the point, you know?
Yeah. And again, she's in it. She is clearly also gone somewhere.
Not all men. That crap, not all men. Nobody's saying that. No. And I don't think the movie is necessarily saying that. But if it is, that's fine, because it's one movie, one story about her experiences.
Right. And you see why she gets to that point where she would get to.
Yeah.
Right.
And yet the film ends with her with a smile on her face,
looking at a leaf.
So she's
the only time we've seen was with Rory Kinnear naked, as I guess
stuffed in his head.
Stuffed in his head and growing from his body.
Yeah. So one of the figures he plays is the personification of the Green Man, and we see him transform throughout the film, whereas his face is scarred originally, and then he cuts his brow open so he can shove in a leaf. And
is that him taking in is that him? What does that mean? What does that mean to you? I'm curious. I'm doing what Richard did 2 days ago, where it's like asking the English fucking school questions. But what does him sticking the leaf in his forehead mean to you? Because I'm curious what.
Well, I just thought that was part of the transformation. Like he has to actually do that so that it will start growing, and then at the end, his face is like a lot of the actual images of the Green Man with that foliage coming out of his face. So it's not maybe a natural thing for him. He has to get the process started. And it obviously has occurred in the past because of that scarring on his body. His face is bumpy and he already has cuts in it. And then when he encounters her, I think the second time, and blows the dandelion at her, he has more scars. It's like he's getting it to progress. That's how I saw it. I didn't really take anything other than, he's starting the transformation. to
Right.
where at the end he has a full head of foliage
Right.
and thorns, along his back and shoulders and things like that.
So, the way I looked at it is, again, like you said, it's this transformation into something else. It's, the Green Man it represents springtime, renewal, rebirth. And yeah, I mean, the way I interpreted it is he inserts that leaf into his forehead, right? Which the earth is always represented how? Feminine, right? Mother Earth, Gaia even. And my kind of interpretation was that's his journey to, like you said, reborn himself. And there's this weird thing where I kind of think he's going on that journey, that character is, because I don't think that character is the same as the other men in the movie. I think, and again, I wonder if that was Alex Garland's intention or not, in regards to that character is not the other male characters. It feels like that character is also going on his own journey along with her. Because like you said, at the end of the movie, you see him and he is the Green Man, which signifies rebirth, but it also signifies the merging of male and female in some ways. Because again, femininity is often, or earth is often ascribed to femininity, or nature is, right? I mean, nature is often seen more feminine than male. And
Mother Nature.
Right. And that's the way I interpret it is he's internalizing outside knowledge that then he uses to help inform her and take her on her journey. I guess it could be problematic saying, well, a man has to take the woman on the journey herself. She can't be the one to go on it, but you can't go unwillingly on a introspective journey. Only you can go on that. And so that's my interpretation of it. Again, there's a lot going on here. I don't know if that's even right. But there's enough visual cues and visual language in the movie and enough evidence that I could give to give you an idea as to why it kind of seems that way. And again, the movie ends with her looking at the leaf and smiling, which would lead me to believe that that character represents something else in the movie, not just the male, the negativity that masculinity has infected throughout the movie.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. He puts his arm through the male slot,
but we never see whose arm that is.
Yeah, right.
Because the next character we see with that arm wound is the young boy who was, the most aggressive character in the movie. When you first meet him, he's calling her a bitch. He's being verbally abusive.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd have to watch that scene again because he doesn't. Like when we're introduced to him, even though obviously it's a frightening thing to have a naked man in your yard,
right?
Especially in some place that you're not familiar with.
But again, I never get the sense that he's violent,
right? Yes, I agree that, and that's what he's there, but he probably doesn't really respect boundaries. I mean, if he's nature boy, somebody's house, or
is he just naked because? Is he just naked because he's a representation of Adam?
Right.
Because again, there is that. I mean, the apple thing.
Right.
The apple thing is a little on the nose.
Oh yeah. When first time I watched it, I was sitting by myself, so that's my first thought. We were watching it together last night. My wife's like, "Oh," I mean, it was just simple as that. Like, yeah.
Right. It is. I mean,
that story.
Yeah, and it is that. He's the first thing. Almost one of the first things that Jeffrey says to Harper is, "Oh, did you eat an apple? Oh, don't do that." Oh, just kidding. And so again, it's like what you've already set the stage here. Now I get where this is going. But at the end of the movie, like we've said, she goes on this transformative, positive journey, it would seem, at least starting the process.
Yeah. But then that's what I took from it.
Right.
She's had her confrontation with her husband, the final form.
Or her construct of her husband.
Right. I mean, that kind of goes to your point. Like, are these all the same guys or what? Or are we seeing it that way? And
that's my interpretation.
She sees her husband finally at the end and it says, well, what do you want from me? And it doesn't even matter to me what he says because it's kind of like, whatever it is, I can't give it to you,
Right.
And that might be the first step for her to get out of that that pain. It's interesting when her friend shows up and you get to see that she's pregnant.
Right.
And it seems like a big reveal. And I'm kind of going, well, is that also just kind of an on the nose thing? The whole rebirth deal, or was I supposed to get something else out of that? Or is that maybe her husband's baby? Or what am I?
I wanted to ask you that.
Yeah, I don't know. My immediate thought was, oh shit, did he fuck her friend? Is that why all this happened? But they're still friends? That doesn't seem to make sense.
I don't know. That is the one thing for me that I don't know I would have to watch the movie again to have an answer in my mind. I don't know what her being pregnant.
Yeah, other than just like I said, kind of another on the nose birth cycle thing.
Did you notice what song they play at the end of the movie?
I sort of recognized it, but I wasn't really sure.
Elton John's love song.
Oh, that's what it was.
And again, Alex Garland using a visual and dialogue language. The lyrics of that song are so they help inform the movie. The words I have to say may be simple, but they're true. Until you give your love, there's nothing more we can do. And that's what he says at the end of the movie. All I want is your love.
Right.
And she just goes, yeah. It's such an exasperated, yeah. But then it also says, love is the opening door. Love is what we came for. No one could offer you more. And it's that same thing where it's like, it's the male character. That's exactly what he's saying the entire movie. That's all he wants. That's all those men want is her, to be accepted by her. But that's their problem.
Which is untrue. Which is untrue though, as well. That's not all you really want.
Right.
You want control.
Right.
Love. You're using the word love to mean something
right.
Totally different.
Right. But again, my take on the Rory Kinnear, everybody looking like Rory Kinnear in my mind is her seeing every man as a representation of her husband. And then, as a blank slate, right? They all look the same. They're all acting the same. I'm keeping my eye out on all of them because they're all essentially the same person. My husband, I can't see a man without seeing my husband. And then the men start reflecting that physically. They start showing the wounds that he had. And then by the end of it, it is just him. And it's like you said, this is a rumination again on grief and guilt, because it's, whose fault is it that he doesn't feel loved by her? Whose fault is it? That's essentially what the movie's asking. That's what the movie's asking you to answer. In a relationship, whose fault is it that you don't feel loved? Is it your fault because you can't figure out a way to get okay with yourself enough with the love that you're getting? Or is it your partner's fault because they're not giving you enough love? And it's never one or the other. It's always both. And that's why it bums me out so much to hear those fatalistic views on this movie or movies in general, but a movie like this where it's like this movie is actually very nuanced in what it's trying to say, because there is no perfect answer. There's no perfect answer. And that's the important, one of the important messages of this movie is there is no one answer fits all, but yet you have all the men in the movie looking like Rory Kinnear until they don't. Because again, the movie ends with it not looking like Rory Kinnear.
I could have used even more Rory Kinnears, to be honest with you.
Right.
Like walk into a grocery store and there's just 50 of them.
Right.
All different sizes and shapes and hairs and hairstyles and
how about that? How about the de-aged Rory Kinnear? Good Lord. That was.
Yeah. It just never quite works. But I have to think, okay, this movie, let's compare this movie to the budget of any number of Star Wars shows or films that are doing the same thing, like in Mandalorian, the de-aging of Luke, or CGI, not even de-aging.
Right.
Comparable in my eyes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They have more money than God to do that with, so I was fine with it. It wasn't great, but it made the point. Yeah. The point is, as
even
I watched
in children, she sees her husband.
As I watched it, I kept waiting for her to kind of maybe just give it a glance, like a recognition. All these fuckers look the same.
And again, that's why I think they don't look the same. she's not seeing them. She's not seeing them as the same. She is seeing other people, but the way it's being presented to us, that's again, part of the visual language. And it's just so fucking smart. Like what shocks me more than anything else, Mark, is that it is 2022. It's taken this long for someone to make a movie like this. Right. It is kind of surprising because this is a rather straightforward, in a lot of ways, a rather straightforward way of tackling this topic. Just have one actor play all the men in the movie. And you don't have to do much else, really.
Oh, it's like that little dude playing all the Oompa Loompas in the Johnny Depp Willy Wonka movie.
It's just like that, frankly. It's just like that. I loved it. I loved it. It was just so. I'm seriously honest, very superficial, just basic level. Liked the idea of the men all being played by this, all being the same. It's fucking the same. Real smart.
It's funny to me. Every time somebody walks into that bar, the bartender comes out. He just has one of those Abe Lincoln beards and he's bald. It's but it's still him. It's great. I loved it.
Yeah.
Just on a jokey level.
No, I'm right there with you. All of the kind of headier things aside, I think that this is a much more approachable, this kind of movie. And by this kind of movie, I mean something like It Follows or The Witch or elevated horror. I think this is much more approachable because at the end of the day, if you don't get any of the headier things out of it, it's still an entertaining horror movie. It is still scary. It is still unsettling. It's scary is not the word I would use in every scene, but it's unsettling almost entirely throughout.
Unsettling, I think, is a good, yes, exactly. Those are good words. Cause I felt that watching it, in the middle of the day in a bright house.
Right. I mean, there's that scene where she's sitting. There's that scene where she's sitting in her kitchen, and it's the naked man, the green man, is standing out in the garden, and she's taking her friend on this tour of the thing, and you keep seeing him. It's like that's fucking scary. And this is daylight. This is daylight, middle of the day. Daytime horror is the hardest kind of horror to do, and that's the reason a lot of directors, at least horror directors, don't do it. Because if things are well lit, like where can you hide? Can't hide if everything's well lit. But it's a different kind of unsettling because Alex Garland doesn't hang a lantern on it. And that's the thing that makes it great. He's not Andy Muschietti who's like, nah. There's no noises.
I was just going to say he doesn't become 20 feet tall and run screaming at the camera. Right. During any of this.
Right.
So
this is a really interesting movie that a friend of mine, we have a group chat and she messaged and she's like, it's the weirdest movie I've ever seen. And yeah, it is a weird movie, 100%. But
that's how my daughter took it. I'll tell you that much.
But it is weird. But you know what? If you can look past the weirdness, there is a lot going on, and there is a lot, and it's topical. Mm-hmm. It's always been topical. The toxic masculinity is a problem. And the fact that we finally have a term for it and we can finally start addressing it and dealing with it and moving past it and pointing it out and people not saying you're full of shit, people going, yeah, it's a thing. I'm glad. I'm really glad because this is an important movie I think it's an important movie frankly, for men to watch to see how women do kind of see men in situations. Cause there is that. That is also why Rory Kinnear plays all the characters, because if he plays all the characters, it could be any one of us.
Right.
And again, that isn't necessarily your fault. You being a man, in a lot of ways, when anyone comes to meet you or you meet someone, they're making decisions about you that you can't control based on things that have happened in their life. And again, that's one of the themes of this movie.
I think that's a very big theme in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Again, if you take away all men are bad, you're just flying over the country and you're not looking out the window to see the things beneath you. And again, that's a perfectly fine way of doing things because it is a fucking horror movie and it is scary and it is gross. It is a gross movie.
It has some genuinely stomach churning visuals. And those are the things that hit me. I like that. And those were done well. Talk about the CGI little kid face, maybe not so great, but like you already mentioned, that tableau of him on the rail is gruesome, the knife through the arm, through the door, the mail slot is gruesome. The birthing and rebirthing.
Can we call it the Rory Kinnear nesting doll scene?
Yeah, is pretty gnarly.
Fuck, it's really gnarly.
And
it's all done practically, best I can tell. At least like the close-up shots look very much like a practical effect.
They're done very well if they're not. Either way, it didn't matter because it's like, oh, yeah, that's not one of my favorite things to watch is birthings. No. So, and
it's realistic too. I mean, you see crowning, you see it's.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Placenta.
Yep.
Or yeah.
I do like in the scene when the vicar is about to penetrate her, she penetrates him back.
Oh yeah.
With the knife.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it, man. It's just,
man.
Yeah. I'm so glad we watched this movie. I really am.
I was curious. I was like, well, we'll see, because I liked it. I liked it enough to watch it twice within 4 days. I mean, I figured I probably should, but I know that I'll watch it again. And I thought, I'm curious. I wonder how Chris is going to take this one.
Very well.
Yeah. So that's good. Yeah.
I am probably like yourself, one of those men who tries to be self-aware and tries to not be like the men in this movie. But again, I can't help if that's your perception of me, even if I'm not acting that way. And that's a thing in this movie. It's you can't control other people's perceptions of you based on things that they've experienced.
Based on their experience, because a lot of women have had.
Right. Like it's a large
awful
number.
Experience upon awful experience upon awful experience. And if you have walls up, that's understandable.
Perpetrated normally by men.
And you can either as a man take on that attitude of like, like I haven't done anything.
What did I do? It's not my fault.
I'm not the bad guy here. Or you can maybe try to figure out why that's their perception. Even with the knowledge of like, yeah, I haven't really done anything, but there's something that makes her think that.
Right.
And like you said earlier, I mean, I'm way older than you. So I grew up at a time when there was no term and when this was normal behavior for men. Not, I'm not saying all men, but it wasn't, obviously people had trouble with it. Women would have trouble with it. But if you grow up not having examples of the opposite, it's hard to realize that you're maybe contributing to the same problems. Then when you get older, get into college, find out, okay, yeah, that's not cool to do. These things aren't cool to say. That's not the way to be. This, possessiveness, manipulation, all these other things that people do to each other. And
they're all learned habits from their parents normally.
Right. And
it's seen. It's a seen habit that is reinforced and, just
reinforced
repeated.
In the media, reinforced and
yeah. And it's repeated because it's reinforced. You repeat things that are reinforced.
Yeah. It takes a long time. It took me a long time to realize those things. Oh yeah, that's not cool.
Same. I struggle with it every day. And that's the thing, like being open and honest about it is the way to get away from where this movie is. Being open, being honest, talking about it, having conversations about feeling a certain way, acting a certain way, certain things not being okay. It's better to just say, I don't like this and here's why. It's not necessarily your fault. And I don't think you're doing it intentionally, because a lot of the times people aren't doing things intentionally. It's a way you're perceiving it and then the way you're reacting to it. And again, I love this movie because these are the things that I already am thinking about all the time. I am thinking about how I can do better as a man for the women in my life and for the men in my life who I do see doing things like this. And if we don't say anything, who the fuck will? And
right.
that's one of the messages of this movie. We never get to see any men say anything because all the men in this movie are shades of terrible. But that doesn't mean in this world there aren't. Just here, that's the way it is. But that's the narrative that Alex Garland is telling, because that's the fucking message that he's trying to get across. Is the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
But I being an ally of women in general, I think is important. I mean, we always talk about LGBTQIA plus, allies, but as far as I'm concerned, being an ally to women is just as important, because listening to their experiences, being there, understanding that it's not my fault in a lot of ways, that you have a preconceived notion of men, and I can't control that, but I can help you understand that it's not always like that. And that's important. And I think that's something that's important that we should all, as men, try to do. And people try to do, is listen to one another.
Yeah. And empathize.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Throw up defenses.
Right.
Immediately.
And again, it's hard. It's not. And, in a lot of ways, we as men grew up in a culture where these kinds of things weren't addressed and nobody said anything. And people did think it was okay. I mean, just as recently as the 90s with Monica Lewinsky. I mean,
right.
I mean, everybody now realizes, at least now I'm talking about the people in the media, realize now, oh, yeah, that was a bad look, to literally just slut shame her for years and easy punching bag. But now we as a society, at least the society writ large, is catching on to that's not been okay. It was never okay. And just because we did it didn't make it okay. And being honest about it is important. And again, that's the thing. And like we've said about this movie, the character of Harper never gets to know why her husband did what he did. But frankly, it doesn't matter. Yeah. He's dead either way.
And that might be the only thing that she really is struggling. I mean, she says as much to the vicar, and I'll probably never know. I mean, she can't. There's no possibility.
You will never know.
And that's the kind of thing that a person will go over in their head constantly and go, oh yeah, it must have been an accident, and have that as solace. And then immediately, your mind goes, no, he probably did it on purpose, and I'm partly at fault for that. And that might be the only thing, not even really guilt, just that not knowing,
right?
Was it intentional or not? And if it was, then it means this. And
if it wasn't,
going back
then it
and forth,
this.
And you can't ever know on that, but that doesn't stop you from going through both scenarios,
right?
And thinking about what each of those scenarios means. And that might be the piece that she's able to get to at the end, or to not even to get to, but to start understanding. And that might be what the Green Man is helping her with. That might be her rebirth to transform out of that thought pattern.
What happened at the end of Annihilation?
It's been so long.
You just described the end of the movie. You described and Natalie Portman's character goes through a transformation, be it an actual physical transformation or a mental. In Annihilation, it's implied to be a physical transformation, but also a mental one. In this movie, the only question I have about this movie at the end, and again, this is a like CinemaSins dum-dum question. What did happen? Because the car is crashed and she is bloodied. So what? Like, it's not one of those things where her friend shows up and nothing is amiss, and this was all her mentally processing all of this. This did happen. So I'm just curious, not that it matters, but I'm just curious, what did happen?
You would think that that was the thing that kind of threw me off too, is there are blood smears on the ground. She has blood from the lobster claw around her neck.
So her friend sees the car crashed. The car crashed.
And yet, you don't see the discarded bodies anywhere on the property. Not that it's, there should be something around the front of the house where all these rebirths took place. So I did think about that, especially the second time, because as I was trying to pick up on more things. Oh, notice the pregnancy. What does that mean? Other than she's pregnant and rebirth or birth. Is Riley going to go into the house with her and find a half dozen desiccated bodies with split hands and broken leg? What does it matter?
Right.
Maybe it was just to get to this point. That's it. None of this happened. We can go that route. None of this happened. She wrecked her car because she was trying to leave and got confused. Who knows? But she's come to a point where she's getting to be okay with, what happened to her husband. Maybe that's all it is. Who knows?
But again, I only ask because you see it at the end. And that's just me asking, everything is done intentionally in this movie. So that's why I'm asking. Because Alex Garland is I don't want to say Kubrick, but Kubrick was one of those people where everything was done for a reason. And it feels like, the scene with the vicar with his finger, all the shots of the font, there is something here you're trying to get us to. I'm just curious what your take was. Yeah. I frankly don't really have an answer because again, I don't even have an answer about the pregnant thing. Cause again, that feels like there's something there too, or maybe there's not, but they've made a point of showing it and kind of her reaction to it. So
yeah,
no, I am absolutely 100% on board with this movie. And like I said, I am so fucking glad that we watched it because this is a movie I'm going to watch again in the next 48 hours. And I will Shanghai other people into watching it with me. Because I want to know what some of the women in my life think about this movie. Because again, there are things in this movie that it's like, do you perceive this way from time to time? How can I do better, or how can I address it, or what can I do? Or I just want to listen to you. You tell me. This movie does start a conversation, and I think it's a good conversation to have as well. Again, for men and for women and for men and women together. Is this movie going to solve toxic masculinity? No, but it's a pretty goddamn good rumination on it. And there aren't enough of these kinds of movies, but I kind of get the feeling we're going to be getting more of them as time progresses.
I'm trying to think of a recent film by a man that took on the same topic. And I know there is one, or maybe I'm just thinking of this. This hasn't been out that long though. I'll of course think of it afterward.
After the fact.
I'll record it and send it to you to tack on at the end. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those movies that could have gone either way. I saw enough of both sides. Some people loved it. Some people are meh. Man, I thought, well, I like Alex Garland. I like Jessie Buckley. I like Rory Kinnear. I knew that it had aspects of folk horror, which is up my alley. And just movies in the English countryside are up my alley. And this can go either way. Is it going to be simplistic or not? Does it matter? Came away really, really loving it too. So,
yeah. No, this is, for me, like I said, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but right now, this is the best thing I've watched all year. And I would suggest anybody who has listened to this point and not gone and watched it, go and watch it. You can rent it online. It's a lot of fun. It's got a lot to say. It's a weird folk horror movie that feels like it takes place in the town right next to the town in Hot Fuzz, the weird English countryside. I love it. I'm a huge fan of the English countryside as well.
Yeah, me too.
I love it. So no, I'm this is definitely in my rotation. If they release an awesome poster for this movie, like they did for Annihilation, it will be hanging on the wall in my house next to my Annihilation poster. I really walked away from this movie going, this is one of the better horror movies I've seen in a very long time. And it really has something to say. And I think it says it rather well.
You don't like the one with Rory Kinnear as Jeffrey going, smiling?
No,
he's so great. He's so great as that, particularly as that character.
Yeah. Oh my
Apple
God.
Scrumping. Hang him.
Yeah. That character is one of the best parts of the movie, but my God, just when he loses it and he starts screaming while driving that car, it's horrifying.
Yeah. One thing we didn't touch on was the little bit with the piano, and he asks her, "Do you play?" She says no. And then, of course, later on, we find out that she can play quite well. And my wife's like, "Oh, another one of those, comments." That's all you got to say. It's like, why did she not?
Right.
Why did she not tell him that she plays the piano? Because what would transpire after that? Him asking her to play something,
right?
Right. Well, what's the? So
it's an avoidance thing.
Very simple thing that you could completely miss. That earlier she had said no, she doesn't play, and now she's playing. And it's not like she learned how to play. I mean, I guess you could confuse that and think, oh, she learned the house is magic.
I mean, the house is magic because at one point her text messages don't go through.
Right. Yeah.
Again, that's why I was saying like the cabin in the wood thing. It's the isolation part of this. And again, like I like those stories too, where a character goes, I need to go somewhere and go on a journey. And I like that because that's where this is. This is one of these journeys that this character goes on. But yeah, it's cabin in the woods. She's isolated. She's in the middle of nowhere. She's far away from her friend who you don't even know if they're showing up or not.
Yeah. I mean, it's even
ask that question. How did her friend find her? Again, what was
one
happening
of those,
that evening?
Right. It's even one of those, it's usually a couple that gets trapped in a weird town.
Right.
But it's not so much weird like, oh, everybody's a creep and dangerous and out to get us. But it skirts that trope too, but in a very different way. And I like those kind of movies. Well, they stress me out a little bit sometimes, but I tend to enjoy those strangers type films where we're in a town that's everybody's weird.
The World's End.
We feel uncomfortable. Yeah. And
another English countryside movie.
It's all those things. It's all those different things combined.
And those are things that are unsettling for me. I'm with you, like going into a town and being like, uh-oh. Like,
yeah. I mean, it happens even just in, like, you might travel across the state or something and go to a small town and everything's just a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't
drive 50 miles north of you into far northern California and you'll find some towns don't want to be in. I don't want to be in. And I'm a white man and you're a white man. And even I don't want to be there.
It's unsettling. It's that unnerving thing you were talking about earlier. And of course,
that little
most of those movies,
thought in the back of your mind.
Most of those movies take it to the nth degree of like everybody's out to get you or whatever. But yeah, so it sidles up to that a little bit, which is cool.
Well, that's universal, right? That's a universal feeling.
I mean, it seems like it's one of those weird, when things are just a little bit off. Like sometimes you go into a town and instead of the street lights, being up like this, they're sideways. Just something weird like that. Like, why in the fuck are your lights sideways?
Right.
You don't have 7-Elevens, you have 812s.
Right.
Stuff, just weird stuff like that.
So, Mr. Begley, final thoughts on Men.
I wholeheartedly recommend it. I know that for me, it'll be a top movie for 2022. And I plan on watching it multiple times. Or I don't plan on it, but I know I will. It'll be one of those things like, all right, let's watch this. And maybe in a couple of years, Cleo will watch it again with me. I don't think she's going to be watching it again anytime soon. But who knows? Who knows? She might go, let's watch Men again. Now that I've already been traumatized by it.
Right. I am like yourself. I cannot suggest this film enough. It's not going to be for everybody, but there will be people I know that I will suggest this movie to that will walk away from it going, that was weird, but... And then there will be people I know who go, that was weird. And either of those reactions are okay. Because again, there's a lot going on. It's not your fault if you don't catch all of it. I didn't catch all of it. Mark hasn't caught all of it. You've seen it twice. I've seen it once. We're not going to, and again, there's things that you're not going to catch in the third or fourth watch. And there may be maybe things that we never even realized Alex Garland was trying to do and he does, or someone else is going to take it a certain way. That's the beauty of these kinds of films. And that's the beauty of filmmakers who have something to say, know how to say it, and don't give you everything. They leave you.
They didn't spoon feed it.
Right. And I appreciate that.
Which is infinitely more, uninteresting, being spoon fed all the ideas.
It's very Lynchian.
Yeah. There are multiple interpretations available.
And none of them are wrong.
Right.
Right. Because again, as long, wrong is subjective. So, but I'm with you. This was definitely, again, Alex Garland, if you have not seen his other films, definitely go check those out as well. Annihilation, Ex Machina, both great movies. My mileage varied on one of them. Technically, my mileage varied on both. One was a lot, one was very little. But this one, I think for me, is much nearer to Annihilation. Maybe even, this is a good double feature for Annihilation, frankly. More so than Ex Machina would be for Annihilation, because these are talking about the similar themes. Ex Machina is talking about something else. But no, this for me was literally one of the best movies this was one of the best movies I've not just seen this year. This is one of the best horror movies I've seen in a very long time. And
I like all three of those films. I am a fan of Ex Machina. I have watched that one multiple times.
I should revisit it. I feel like I maybe just wasn't in the right headspace. It's got a lot of people I like. Oscar Isaacs, Domhnall Gleeson, and I forget the
Alicia Vikander.
I like all of them. So yeah, no, I'm actually excited to revisit Ex Machina because again, it's Alex Garland is a director to watch. He is a fantastic director. I can't say enough good things about him. So
we'll see if he makes another movie. Apparently he does not have fun doing it. And it was like, I don't know if I'll make another one. So we'll have to hope that he feels better about it at some point.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. He's right now supposedly working on a movie called Civil War, but who knows? I know that the things that he's worked on outside of directing, Dredd, he was the writer on Dredd.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, good God, I don't think you could say enough about that movie. And then he wrote Sunshine, which we spoke about off podcast yesterday. And yeah, that movie's not great, but it's not great not because of Alex Garland. It's not great because it's a Danny Boyle movie. So yeah, I'm super duper excited to see what he comes up with next because
yeah, me too.
The last two movies are any indication, he will hopefully be making movies that we will be talking about for a long time. Because I'm still thinking about Annihilation, and I will be thinking about this movie for a long time. That's for
sure.
So Mr. Begley, when you're not here, So Mr. Begley, when you're not here, where can people find you?
They can find me at wakeupheavy.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, or Facebook at Wake Up Heavy, and the podcast, which Chris has been on multiple times, as well as other people. A lot of times it's just me, is streaming or whatever, podcasting, streaming, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Is that what it's called? You
streaming?
Podcasts?
Yeah, you stream them. I mean, you can download them, but I think most people stream them.
Sure.
And as for me, you can find me at cstashy.com, cstachiw.com. That's my link tree. Go there for all the things I work on. Like Mark mentioned, I'm on his show a fair amount. Mark's on my show a fair amount. If you're listening to this episode, you already realized that. We talk about horror movies quite often. And yeah, as for the show, culturecast.com, patreon.com/culturecast, all the places you can go to find out more about this show or donate if you're into that. But I get it. Times are hard. Mark, thank you so much for joining me. I mean, this was a joint idea. So.
Yeah, this was a spur of the moment one.
Yeah.
And a good, I'm glad I mentioned that I had watched it already.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Cause I would be really disappointed. I don't know what I don't know, but now that I know that I like this movie a lot, I really am glad that you mentioned it to me because I may not have watched it otherwise, at least not soon enough to do a podcast on it. So, and yeah,
there you go.
We watched it. You should too. Catch you on the next episode.